time. I'm Laura Lawrence, I'm the president of RCA, and welcome. And we're so glad to have you here today. And there's something I didn't want to forget. Okay, so there are brochures around. If you're not sure what RCA is, this will help you out. This is brand new, off the press, revised version. And we do encourage if there's like consider joining us and sponsor the events that we do like some issues with our goal is to support the events and station and public. So today we have Fernando Araya, and apparently many of you already know him. So he's going to be talking about native plants and beyond, landscaping and pruning. And basically, it says here that he started in the field of marine science.
Yes.
And then he's gone on and been certified as an arborist and landscaper through Cornell Cooperative Extension. And he is now the sole proprietor of fine gardening and has worked transforming and beautifying many estate landscapes. He describes himself as a humble man who respects the earth. And I think that that's what I've got.
That's what we're all here.
That's why. That's why. So he is going to share his experience, answer some questions. Hopefully, some of you have some pictures or questions for him. And as I said, help yourselves to food at any time. And we keep things kind of low-key and informal, and just enjoy. Thank you.
I'm glad to use the word informal. I am here to help you find an answer. So please do not hesitate to ask a question at any time. Whether you brought in a cell phone, photographs, every so often. I used to work at the state fairgrounds. And sometimes people are afraid to ask a question, particularly when there's a couple. They'll say, I have a tree and I'm waiting for the additional information. And then I'll say, well, do you know what it is? No, I do not. Does it flower? They look at each other and go, yeah, sometimes. What color is it? And they can't agree on the color. So that's why I encourage, please, if you have photographs, cell phones, videos, and please do not feel embarrassed to ask a question. So I am primarily here to answer questions. What do you have? I have no sort of formal presentation to give you. There's some, I brought some hands-on things. You have questions on pruning, but so please ask a question and we'll take it from there. Because I'm sure there's a common question that everyone has and they're afraid to speak up. So there you go.
Yeah, it's very self-serving.
No, go ahead.
We have a large buckeye tree, and we're good friends with the Sears. They
Are you in Fairport?
Yeah, there you go.
Oh,
very, and we know from the Sears that you're really highly regarded, not just for them, but with everything. We're looking for somebody to trim our tree. It's probably 75 to 100 years old. And it used to be that we would have a man local who was good, who would trim it. He no longer does it. What would you recommend in terms of finding somebody who's really good to trim that tree? You know that.
I don't.
As a couple, can I add? This is one person who called him about this chestnut tree last summer. And I sent him photos with my phone. He looked at the photos. We talked about what to do. And it was amazing because literally the process was fascinating because you were able to look at the pictures and say, well, okay. And I say, well, I'm a little worried about this part.
Oh, keep in mind, the photograph is really a one angle.
Yeah.
To get a true feel for the tree,
Right.
You should walk around the tree at least 3 times.
Exactly. You told me, and so I went out and I took the picture. And so it was just, it's a process that I've been a gardener a long time, but it's a process I've never experienced first of all, thank heavens for the phone, but your ability to say, okay, now I need this other image from here, and I go out and I'd have my back to the street and I'd be photographing it from there, but each time I photographed and I sent
You
it to
saw
you,
more.
more information came to me in terms of what to do. And it's sort of like the least restrictive thing to do and. just do
Yes,
what,
low
you know,
impact
and
is,
let nature do what it's going to do and trust it and, okay, it is a large buckeye tree 10 feet from our house, so there's a lot of trust that's been going on for 50 years. So it's good to have Fernando in our corner. Thank you.
the one thing I'll say about when you said about trimming, there's so many people who think that is a rhyme and a reason and a calendar when to trim. You can actually prune any time of the year, is knowing the approach, how to prune it. But the first thing you have to do is identify it. What is it? Now I'm going to do a little bit of men bashing here. Because the wives send out the men now to prune some larger. Everything they, particularly in a city situation, everyone is familiar with a lopper and a head shears, whether it's battery powered, gas powered, or what am I missing? Thank you. Stay away from electric. They're good, but there are some safety hazards with electric tools.
The cords keep getting shorter.
Oh, see, you're admitting it. So what I'm getting at is everyone is looking for that answer. When do I prune it? And I usually ask, why do you wish to prune? So sometimes your wishes are not necessarily conducive to what your hopes are for the plants. In most homes, I notice everyone has this thing about everything has to be in a dome, a square, an obelisk. That's fine, but you have to start young. If you do it at old, you're actually taking large pieces of wood out of there, live wood usually, and you're having problems when you put the plant under stress. And one of the stress responses the plant does is puts out new, faster growth, particularly if the plant is in good soil, light, and air. Plants are really no different than you and I. We only differ in one respect. Does anyone know what it is? We have the same requirements as plants do. Anyone? Okay, we need air. We need water. We need light. The only thing we differ from how plants differ from us is they do not have an immune system. Human animal cells do. So when you're cutting, you can actually, particularly if you're careless with your tools, as far as being sharp, being disinfected, if you have a problem with other diseases in your yard, or you're doing a goodwill, being a good Samaritan, you're going to someone else's yard and they have issues, and then you're translocating it to your plant. Sometimes it's very subtle and it takes time, but if the plant has been under stress, you're actually inducing more stress. And sometimes stress on plants, they want to go back up to achieve that growth you took off. But if you know how to prune, you can control that plant in a structurally sound and aesthetically pleasing, as opposed, because if you're going to prune everything into a ball, a square, or an obelisk, or whatever you do, some plants you can do that, but you have to start young. You are going to be creating more work, and in some cases, you're actually stressing the plant even more. So you have to identify the plant and what are the conditions that the plant is living in, and what are your wishes. But remember, please hold your wishes at the bottom end of the list. Don't try to put everything into a square, round. So I exercise selective thinning. Perhaps everyone has heard the 3D principle. Anyone know that one is? There's disease, dead and damaged. Those are the things you should first target when you're doing plant healthcare before you tackle anything else. So you'll have to essentially develop a keen eye. What is the disease? What is disease wood? Obviously, what is dead? But I'll give you one that's so simple. You can take a pen knife, utility knife, or even your fingernails. If you think there's anything dead, all you have to do is just prick it. If you find green, it's obviously alive. So sometimes I'm really bad at drawing. Say you have a bud here. I'll get out of the way for those who can't see the camera. And you have a bud, and say this is dying back because it's brown, it's blistering bark, or the color is just receded back. You just keep pricking it until you find a live point. Now, most people have a tendency to do this. They'll just cut. Give me a second. They'll just prune off straight across. And I'm sure most of you have seen city streets around here where they just whack off the limbs. And then within the following growing season, all you see is this. All this growth. And this is referred to as epiformic. Epi just being just like epidermis on the skin. All these buds are actually just growing from the surface. They never originate from further in. So these are all structurally weak. And some of these will go really long, and then particularly since I gather most of everyone here lives in Oswego. Well, you'll see some years, you get all this growth going up like this, which sometimes we call the Hydra effect, the mythical. And it just collects snow. But equally so, squirrels move in and just fill it in. But if it collects snow on top, eventually those limbs are going to bend over, and you can actually grab these with one hand and just easily just pull them off again because it's just growing on the surface. They're not like that butter actually originated further in. And everyone has seen where there's a vein going in a large limb that originates back to the core. Just please remember that the core of any plant, particularly trees, the only thing that's alive in the temperate forest, there is an exception. It's actually this first few inches. When I'm referring to trees, on shrubs, it's actually considerably small. Everything else is actually just structural wood because the cells are building on top of each other. It grows from outside out, not from inside out. I just mentioned there's an exception, that is tropical trees. Palms are green from the outside all the way to the core. In this forest, it's not. These cells die off and it just keeps stacking cells. That's why you get this growth. So this explanation is leading to the fact about disease, damage, and death. So if you are carelessly pruning off things with the improper tool, including some people actually use a hatchet, you're actually reducing too many entry points for, particularly if the tool was contaminated, entry points of the wood were actually going to spread that disease. If it's not spread by the tool, the plant could be stressed, and both in unison can actually cause limbs to recede. And I'm sure you want to do work that's going to be long-term as opposed to doing it every year. How many people here, and be not afraid to answer, by show of hands, prune, say, a hedge every year, the same hedge? And can I ask, what kind of hedge do you have? Do you have a privet, boxwood?
Emerald green,
Emerald green. How tall is it?
10 feet.
That's a good size. It can grow a lot taller than that. I'll get to that point. I'm leading up to it. But I'll continue. On the emerald green arborvitae, or even the American black, any of the arborvitaes, or even if you happen to have hemlock as a hedge. If you keep, I'm sure you notice that even if you have evergreens or deciduous hedge in your home, when you're constantly taking the shears at one level, because you want to maintain it, say 6 foot, even 3 feet, you ever notice from a distance, particularly in the winter months, how you get a thickening, you get this little band all the way across, and then it gets sparse in the bottom. You keep cutting in the same level, you actually, all you're doing is producing more dead wood. So in most hedges, it's best, that's why I exercise. It takes a little longer, but the long-term effect is you'll have years. I've done hedges, European fern-leaf beech, once every 5 years, just by knowing where to prune it. And I've done 45-foot tall trees. I strung a line and then you just get up there and you just stagger your cuts. You don't want to do it one level. Again, you're trying to achieve the structural integrity of the plant. You're trying to make it as strong as possible that it can stand on its own because of wind or even its own growth or snow or ice. Because we do live in a unique area as far as coming, and I'm sure you saw a little bit of tree damage going down the driveway. Some of them, I really don't want to say it's because the trees are old. A lot of people use it, it's old. No, it's just, they're all fighting for light and there's competition and they cross and they split and one falls onto the other, there's an entry point. So all that is just weakness. It's no different if I were to kick you in the shins once a day for the next 3 weeks, you're going to develop a wound. Even if I just kick you lightly, you're going to develop callus cells there. The plant is no different. So that's my approach to plants, is knowing where to do it, how much to take out. But again, please, you got to identify the plant. There's some things you don't want to prune. Now, I'm a tree climber. There's some things I don't do on certain times of year. For example, if you were to ask me to prune a cherry tree, ideally, we should not be standing on a cherry tree. I'm speaking of ornamental cherries. Black cherries are totally different. Ornamental cherries, whether someone here has, what am I going to say? The fountain, the weeping types, or the Yoshino. It's because the bark is so thin. There are some lilacs will do the same thing. They're so thin, you do not want to stand on the tree and rotate your foot. Because those cells, it's so thin, it's just floating on that chlorophyll and that mucilage and a nice soft wood. So by stepping on it, the analogy that I gave earlier about if I were to kick you in the shins every day for a month, you're going to develop a problem. The plant is the same way. So if you're standing on there or holding a ladder, strapping it, continue, you're going to disrupt it. Either the bark will die off and then you get shoots coming out, or the whole limb will recede. So I thank you for your compliment on, there's more to it, but this is not intended to be complex. It's very simple. If you follow the 3D, the dead, damaged, and disease, and then once you do that, you go for the live wood if you need to remove the live wood. Yes.
So are you saying that the 3 Ds are the only times that you ideally should be trimming? Is that where you're getting at?
No, yes and no. Again, in my profession, if people ask, I need the following prunes. Everyone thinks that May or even a spring, you got to prune everything. It has never been written that way. And the proof is in the pudding. You look at the plants. How is this plant responding? And if you're lost on the subject of pruning, is wait till spring. I'll give you the classic one that all ladies ask me at the State Fairground. That is hydrangeas. Why aren't they blooming? And the first question I'll ask is, when did you prune it? They say, why cut it back in the fall? Well, there's the problem at first. Not all hydrangeas. So right now, I'm sure you go out here, all hydrangeas. I'm trying to answer your question. Okay, this is it. When you'll see that some of the stems turn light colored. Some of them be brownish. That's because of the cold. Before we get there, please keep in mind that we haven't had that much snowfall in these past few years, and snow is so critical. When you have large amount of snow covering this plant, the temperature underneath that snow cannot fall underneath 32 degrees. And that keeps everything alive. Classic one is another one for hydrangea is the forsythia. You ever notice that sometimes it blooms more at the bottom and on top? That's because it's underneath the snow. All those buds are protected. Having that protection against desiccating winds will assure the survival of that bud from being dehydrated. But getting back to hydrangea, but there are other plants the same way. This time of year, you'll actually see the swelling of buds all over. Some of them will be brown. If you want to tackle, if you want to make sure that the hydrangea will bloom for you, don't do what most people do, is cut everything off for the winter. They think they're protecting the plant. Well, you're actually losing a lot of potential growth that you're going to have in the spring of the year. You'll be well ahead of everyone else. Even if you throw your Christmas trees or boughs against it, you will protect that plant if you have no snow cover. But anyway, in the spring of the year, whenever that is, you observe the plant. Again, it doesn't have to be hydrangea. You'll be able to tell even on a small cherry tree, which ones are desiccated, and sometimes you just barely touch it with your fingernail and they'll fall right off. Well, that bud is gone. It's just because of wind. Wind or the limb is so thin here that it just because of the nighttime cold and the daytime warming, it just goes through this heaving and the cells just become ruptured underneath. You'll see crinkling. I say it's not only hydrangeas, but other plants too. So you have to be observant. So, so if you see that dead, just cut it right at the bud, right above the bud. And then all like that, and then you'll be at least a month ahead of schedule. If you have another, say, next door neighbor, and you can do, if you have more than one plant, exercise what you believe and exercise what I'm trying to instruct on. And you'll see that it does work. Yes.
Can I move you back to the weeping cherry?
Yeah.
There's one in our memorial garden on East First, and it developed, of course, that beautiful weeping shape. Some well-intentioned purpose, a person brutally trimmed all that off. I guess they wanted to be able to ride a mower under it or something. We aren't sure what to do. We've done nothing, and we're hoping it'll come back. And have you had any experience with this?
All weeping cherries do not exist as a species in nature. They're all grafted. So if someone is nicking that trunk,
They didn't bother the trunk. They just cut all
the top off. Exactly.
Shaved it right off.
See, there was a guy, a man. Sis, I hate to say that, but, and I don't mean to be insulting, but if they're not willing to listen, that individual just keep doing it year after year, just cutting it off. And then the other tree that people do that is a weeping mulberry tree. No, there's weeping mulberries around here. It's a short, usually it's this is because how they shear it. And then you get this, a weeping mulberry, and they cut it all at the same level. And you get this thing just kind of, it has no appeal aesthetically. And also eventually the plants will suffer because you have all this dead wood in the center is competing and buds are trying to come out, but they can't. They go in a different way.
Well, this is the third year now, and it seems to be starting to shape itself again. And we think we got to the people that did it. So they should.
But look at the graph point. The graph point is, you ever notice that a weeping cherry or a weeping mulberry, weeping lilac, it doesn't have to be weeping, lilacs, some lilacs like the Korean, Little Miss Kim. There'll be this bulge right there. And this is actually flat. So this is the different rootstock.
That's the graft union.
Yeah, right here, the graft unit. So what they do is they'll take a little spear and actually slice it and actually take a tender wood the first year, make it into a spear and actually insert it in there. And then it's actually held in by paraffin wax, latex rubber bands, even cotton string. You have to keep it dry in order for that to take, because it's cambium against cambium. You gotta have those two cells meeting and they'll spread up. So this individual just probably cut everything off right here. So what I'm trying to get at is a lot of times people create work too much, where sometimes they have to do it twice a year. It's their fixation that it has to be done because it doesn't appeal to their eye and they're trying to control everything. You should go in there and start with a sharp tool, go in there and try and eliminate as much of the dead wood out of it to allow new buds to emerge here. If you're getting buds from here, this rootstock, the leaf is much larger than this, the growth you're desiring. And then this, the dominant, will actually take over. And there are trees, since you're one of the tree stewards, you've probably seen Norway maples, Queen Elizabeth, which is a white variegated Norway maple. That is a tree that you have to have a keen eye keeping out. Where is the rootstock? And what if you don't, you'll get the larger leaf, and then the beautiful white variegated leaf will actually be seized because the white is taken over. So that's why I'm getting at is everyone's got this thing about trying to prune things at a specific time. You have to ask the plant when to do it. Be not afraid to talk to plants. I am a plant hugger. And did I answer your question?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I have a question about what you said. I've never seen one of those trees in Oswego with the variegate with the white leaf.
Oh, the Norway maple?
Yeah.
It's called the Queen Elizabeth.
Is there any in town that you know of?
There's someone probably has one. I'll answer it this way. They probably have it. They pruned it and they got rid of one or the other in the rootstock. The rootstock always dominates. Whether it's even most roses are grafted. Your tea roses are grafted. You'll actually see, if you don't believe me, just cut it off really close. You'll actually see leaves coming out and the leaf is much larger than the top, which is possible that you may not get the red, the yellow, the pinkish, the fragrant rose. You may get something else out of it. It may please you, but you have to, again, look at the structure of the plant. You have to do it. No different than how you look at yourself. You know, you're grooming yourself. It's the same principle, but just if you're being careful about yourself, you should exercise the same thing on the plant and you'll be in a win-win situation. Yes.
I have a picture of my tree. It's a plum tree that's supposed to grow big and look pretty like this, but it has some.
Thank you for saying that. I get a lot of those. What? I get clients that going, I have this, but I don't like the picture. You're looking at the picture, you're not looking at the plant. But yes, bring it up, please.
But I have.
It's like a lot of it's dead. This was like the second year. And I didn't know where to start to prune it.
Okay, it's the finger prick idea.
So a lot of that has to go.
It looks like from the color here. Thank you for saying that, the black knot disease. But this doesn't have it. Anyone here aware of what's black knot disease?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know that has it.
No, you'll get these grotesque black things
Oh, my
and they just,
Yeah.
it looks like charred wood. And when you see it, excuse me?
I said, this is time to talk about natural plants. That
Sure.
instead of talking about all the, everybody who wants to have these fancy trees that don't belong here in the first place,
We'll
It's
tell
not a
it.
fancy tree, it's just a plum tree. Wouldn't say it's fancy, would you?
No, I know what she's getting at, and your definition and hers is totally different, and I know. No. We're not gonna hurt anyone here. You'll have to determine by using your fingertip. Give me a stick. If you can hold that, please.
Yeah.
This is an invasive plant, by the way. This is the Japanese lilac, honeysuckle. I'll show you, ma'am.
okay.
Some people say that they'll think that's dead.
Mhm.
But if you dive on your lilac, on your plum, you just do this. You see the green?
Mhm.
So that's alive. You just start from the top and work down. You're trying to find it, and then that's where you're gonna prune it.
You can put it above the.
So
where
what
it's
you
not
wanna
green
do is-
anymore.
Exactly. And then water.
Mhm. Okay,
It don't feel silly because I've actually had people, you have to water and be the laughing stock of your neighborhood in late winter because you cannot depend on snow anymore. You don't have the last laugh of them. Yours will bloom, theirs will not, they're going deep.
okay.
I suspect, get rid of that grass, put in wood chips, even ground up leaves. This is a result of dehydration. It is because it's so tender. It had a lot of growth. That's why you have this broom effect here.
Mhm.
It has a lot of aggressive growth, but the plant is not dying. You just have to get rid of whatever's dead up there.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes, and then I'll get to your,
I've got a mock orange, sort of. I consider it a mocking orange.
oh, it laughs at you, huh?
Yeah, it's laughing at me. Every now and then she gets a bloom. So that I keep interested in the possibility it might turn into a mock orange. What's happening?
When do you prune it? Do you prune it after or before it blooms?
Well, for a number of years now, it hasn't bloomed. Maybe one or two bloom. And I would trim it after it bloomed, if it bloomed.
Define how you trim it.
Well, in the past, I think I used the general larger tools kind of approach.
Do you
Uh,
stagger
really
your cuts?
masculine guy thing that you're talking about. Yeah, and yeah,
Oh, I saw that action.
yeah,
There you go.
okay, but then I thought, well, I get back down to the bottom and it'll remember what it is and start being a mock orange.
Your
But it
mock
didn't-
orange is growing like this. And there's a lot of dead wood in it, isn't there?
Oh, yeah, well, no, actually, a lot of leaves,
A lot of leaves?
yeah.
Is it a fairly fertile soil?
Not particularly fertile, but it did blossom early on.
Is it near a lawn?
No, it's kind of separated from the lawn.
Is
It's
it
along the house.
Okay, is that area of the earth sort of has ample rainfall, ample irrigation, or any possibility of residual fertilizer spreading? Or was it a former farming house where they spread manure?
Well, it is an old farmhouse. It probably is.
So
old.
you
Yeah,
dig down,
yeah,
doesn't it go less than a foot? If you have a good olfactory senses, smell it. If you smell the slightest bit of nitrogen, urea, or manure, Richard Doherty, he can tell you about the spring house at Great Bear, digging down.
yeah.
So what happens is there's a possibility that you have a nitrogen-rich soil or conditions contribute that you're getting more leaves and flowers.
Huh.
So when you're pruning it, by the way, this is not just ornamental, it applies to natural things in nature. So you have to just stagger your cuts. May I suggest, obviously you wear glasses, but just be careful because you know the stalks. If you hit them the wrong way, you bend over, you will. They're sharp because they have the scaly bark on it. They just paper it. So what you want to do is, if this is a mock orange. By the way, it's one of the favorite things of women, just they love the smell. So you just want to get rid of all the dead and damaged wood out of it. And then actually trying to promote. Pruning is promoting growth. You're not restricting growth. There's one thing that you do in your landscape that you prune, most of us, weekly to promote growth. What is it? There's something that everyone here does weekly.
Lettuce?
I heard it.
What was it? Grass.
Grass.
Exactly.
Oh,
By mowing it with a sharp tool, you're actually promoting new aggressive growth. The same applies to plant. You just have to know how to use this, where to target the plant. But in your case, may I suggest you get rid of all the dead wood. What you think is not dead, just keep going down and try to promote. But ideally, if it blooms this year, you should do it immediately after it's bloomed. But a mock orange blooms on the New Year's growth. So that's why I said earlier about identifying your plant before you tackle it, because whether it's a wild clematis or even an ornamental clematis, you have to know when it blooms. Because if you're going to handle everything at the same sort of principle, you're going to say, well, it never blooms. I'll just give it more fertilizer. That's the worst thing you can do. More fertilizer is not the secret. Water is the secret to life. And you can do this at home. Don't fertilize the plant, just water on a regular basis. You'll have the last laugh compared to someone else. Yes,
Hydrangeas.
what about it?
Um,
It almost follows the same thing.
Same thing about
Yes.
the pruning thing, there's some that when I first started hydrangeas, I pruned everything thinking I prune for spring bloom. And then I learned that through trial and mostly error, that there are some that bloom later, and the timing of when you prune
Yes.
is essential depending on the type of hydrangea that you have.
When you're coming across these literatures, please keep in mind is where does the author live? Does he live in California?
Yeah.
And it's a point that I like to make because, again, it goes back to people asking, when should I prune it? How should I prune it? This says, well, I have to really know your soil, or please be observant of your soil conditions, your sunlight conditions, your weather conditions, and the wind conditions. You can do everything right, and then you get airborne funguses that travel through, and you may be the ideal plant, and it just succumbs to it. So you have to identify plants. Now, to the lady asking about the natural things, please. By the way, I don't want you to think this strictly applies to just the ornamental plant. It applies even to plants in the wild. Plants, trees in particular, prune themselves. Can anyone tell me by what process?
Wind.
That's one. That's the most critical one. That's the more important. What's the other one? Two.
Shaded box.
Yes. That's how they overcome. If a plant, if a limb is not getting enough sunlight, it will shed off that limb off. It's no different than humans' hypothermia. If we're in freezing conditions, the body just shuts down on the fingertips. Again, we are no different. Plants are no different than we are. It will, burn all those up, and people have lost fingers, and they have lost noses and ears, just to be able to maintain the body core. That's the essence. The plant does the same thing. The one thing I haven't mentioned, I just caught myself, about pruning. This which will possibly answer your question also, and anyone else's question. Pruning is not just what you see on the surface. You take a sharp shovel in a right angle. Some plants respond really well to being root pruned, even if you do 1/4 of it, unless you got really good soil, you go all the way around to stimulate growth. There is an art form that exercises that beautifully. Does anyone know what that is? Exactly. It's not just nipping it, bonsai. But you can do it on a macro level. Your life size is actually to stimulate growth of the root system, because that's how the plant gets any available nutrients is out of the soil and moisture. Plants really need a minuscule amount of elements to survive. This water is critical because it produces through photosynthesis. So yes, root pruning as another option is consider root pruning with a sharp shovel. I mean, really file it down, not do a knife point, just another you can pen it. And you don't want to keep smashing it. You're just trying to plunge it, jump on it like a pogo stick to break that. And you have to be patient. Sometimes some plants will take 2 growing seasons, sometimes even 3, before you see the end results. As long as you don't be aware of that saying, a watch pot never boils. So the day you just don't look at it. If you're expecting it tomorrow, it's not going to happen. When you least expect it, may I suggest you grab a cup of tea, coffee, and sit down right in front of your artwork.
What would the symptoms be that you would see that can cause you to root them?
If you just want to see more aggressive growth of the plant. Oh, I see what you get at. In situations where you're finding too many of the root systems, more so trees, well, there are some shrubs, where I've done this in the wild, where because of the hard pan soil or even a rocky substrate, the roots are growing on the surface. And you're noticing it's putting out more growth over that surface because it is being driven by trying to find moisture. So if you want to train it to remain in the area that you've actually installed it in, you can actually exercise root pruning to generate more of a holdfast. The holdfast is what's holding it. And this is one thing I do exercise when I plant. I don't just prune, I actually plant tall trees also. Knowing the level. Just look around in the woods. At some point in your travels, you probably see a tree or shrub. It's the way it's actually emerging out of the ground. And you can see those holdfast holding it. Bonsais do the same thing. They're trying to show that there's a term. Do you know what the term is? It's actually trying to get that soil, those roots, to be exposed. Exposed partially, not fully. It just gives the plant character. You should do the same thing. But I've seen so many places where plants, particularly trees, are coming out of the ground like a utility pole. And which, to me, it actually incites people, promotes people to get real close with the string trimmer, lawnmower, and actually apply chemicals to control the grass. And you're getting too close to an area where you can actually lose all your efforts. And then most people in the state fair is the same thing. They take it out on the plant. They never admit their fault. It's always it's a messy tree, and it's this and that. It's really comical at the state fair. That I have at least 9 years experience trying to answer questions there. But it's really simple, and I realize I do it as a profession. But it's I was a marine technician for the federal government for quite a few years. But marriage drove me to stay on land. But did someone say a good man? I do miss being out there. I've been to all 4 quadrants of the planet. I would like to give you
about giving us some recommendations of good plants you think we should be?
Native plants that would be good for landscape.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Again, I promote people asking. I just want to be a benefit to you, not just be out here just babbling on. Please keep in mind that plants do what they do. They are native plants from the US that are highly aggressive, very aggressive. But with those plants, we do not deem them or label them as being invasive. We tend to label the invasive on plants that are from another land. There is one plant around here that is seen very readily. Actually, I saw it coming down here. That is not, but everyone thinks it's native and it's not. And it's a low evergreen plant. Can you tell me what it is?
Juniper?
Nope,
You?
nope. It's low, meaning below your ankles.
Ferns?
Nope,
Princess pine.
nope, that's native,
Oh, is it?
yes. It has a blue flower and has a pretty little,
Lisa vine?
yes, yeah, exactly. It's European,
Is it?
yes. Dandelions were brought here by the English and everything else with it. Now, there's one plant that grows around here that we really look at it. For those who are sort of not savvy, knowledgeable, well-read, the buckthorn. It's European. But getting back to, there are a lot of plants that you find out here. They're not native. Mulberries. Mulberries, there is an American species, but the mulberry that you commonly see is actually from Asia. And that was started here by the silk industry, but it's easy to find. Why is it easy to find? No different than a buckthorn. Is because birds love to eat it and they just rest, and relieve themselves. And there's that seed.
It's just silly thing, multi-floor rows. If somebody can find a edible way to deal with them or something.
Sure, you can collect the rose hip, but it's a lot of effort.
And danger.
Oh, yeah.
Is that a native plant? No, of course not.
No.
It does so well.
Oh, exactly. You ever notice that all the things that do well are actually invasive, or we just don't like them anymore? So most people find surprising that the myrtle is actually not native to and like I said, dandelion is, there is one beautiful thing that grows, and I really enjoy seeing the plant because it's so resilient. That is, it's found in lawns. Usually in a municipal lawn, more so than, not that there was intentionally planted, but you do find it in someone's yard. And it grows white, and it grows sometimes pinkish or beautiful. It has a tiny, beautiful little, I actually like to hear the name of it. Close, I heard someone use the D word, English daisies.
But is that native or is that English?
It's English. It's English. Yes.
And actually,
When we, speaking about invasive species, when a friend of mine, when we moved here, we contacted the agricultural people to ask what would be the best native plants to plant. And they sent us free examples, like each got like 20. And so we each planted 20 multiflora rose, 20 autumn olive, 20, I don't think it was Cassandra, but like almost everything.
Cassandra is not native.
Well,
I
yeah, but I mean, it's interesting because now those things we're aware of. I mean, they are beneficial to birds and autumn.
Yeah,
smells
thank you for
wonderful.
saying it. They are beneficial. It's just that it's not,
Yeah, they spread.
they spread
And
everywhere.
it was just, it's interesting, the change that's happened, the knowledge that's out there now in terms of how these plants affect our landscape and our environment in, sort of negative ways.
Thank you. And I'll go back. There is what I find it's appealing. But so when you're selecting any plant, whether it's native or non-native, you have to know its cultural needs and where it came from, what's it doing in the land or in the area, even in the US, that it originates from. I'll give you a case in point. I find it really appealing because the bumblebees just go nuts over it. It's a native plant. False indigo. Anyone know the plant?
Yeah.
Don't you find that spiked? I find it the chocolate and the bees just, particularly bumblebees, more than anything, I have videos because I was just intrigued. That is, it's really an aquatic plant, very moist soil or right next to the lake, river, and it has its place under the sun, but it can take over. So whatever plant I suggest to you, you have to do the reading because I do not know your soil. I do not know your time you wish to invest into your yard. For some of us, gardening, whether just planting a single plant, is therapeutic. If you have kids, grandkids, a tree, or even a shrub can be used as a chronological indicator. I planted this when I was so tall and little Jimmy was barely up to my hip. Look at it now, that sort of thing. So please don't forget about the false indigo. It's a gorgeous plant when it's in bloom. Some people mistake it for a locust just because it has similar pinnate flowers, pinnate leaves. But again, you have to know your site and the plant's requirement to be the least labor intensive. All things are labor intensive, particularly if people like roses. How many women here like roses? Any men like roses? Everyone likes roses. The fragrance, the color, but it's a lot of effort. And the demands of the climate here, when you have high humidity, low passing air, you're going to have disease problems. So you pick one that doesn't have that. But please keep in mind that the things we like, there's always a trade-off. Well, I can't have the white one. I guess I'll have to go with the yellow one. But I really don't like the leaves. Well, there's always a trade-off. There is nothing perfect out there. You have to be the perfect person. The plant is doing what it does. Yes.
I have a specific question. I'm looking for a native that is fairly low, that will grow in mostly shade, but gets late afternoon hot sun. Because usually you see them the other way around.
Flowering or non-flowering?
I would like something that flowered, but it doesn't.
Everyone wants flower because when you have low light, you're not.
I know.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't flower, that's interesting foliage. I don't want like a ground.
Oh, you want a ground cover?
Think about it.
Yeah, gotcha.
That's a good suggestion. It's sweet woodruff. Easily controlled, and you can do your own May wine. There you go. There's a May apple.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Are you familiar with the May apple is? Tall.
But I can't.
I have to thank you exactly.
What's that?
You can't, I mean, they grow in my yard.
It's difficult. There's some plants.
They're definitely more of a spring. I mean, they bloom in the spring and then they kind of die away.
Yeah, they go away.
See, I'm not surprised when
I
you.
mean, I don't care.
No.
The blue, but the green doesn't last. It just.
It's what I said about the roses. There's always a trade-off.
Yeah.
Always.
So, I mean.
There are no exceptions out there.
No, because most of those things.
There you go, winter green.
Yes, winter green.
Low carbon.
That's
That's native.
Okay.
There is an equivalent. It grows a little taller. There's an equivalent which actually originates in the Pacific Northwest. We call it shallow, which is, our wintergreen is Gaultheria procumbum. This is repin here, shalom there, and it grows taller. You can actually eat it. Now you can't eat wintergreen, but they are toxic to children and some animals.
Really?
Yes, they do have, but you can use it, chew on a leaf for breath freshener, but it's not intended as a daily dose thing. So those are good. What was I going to say? The sweet woodruff, the wintergreen. Have you ever thought about just planting moss?
Yes, I have. I've considered that.
Add this element to the moss.
I'm afraid it gets a little bit too hot and dry, and it's also underneath an oak tree, so it's,
Even better.
I know there are places that'll grow, but this, because there's too much sun here. Is that native? Oh, God, I don't want to, Charlie, thank you. No,
the English brought that over.
I see. But thank you for mentioning it. There is no such thing as a weed.
It's just a plant. not
It's a
really-
plant. A weed is only if you do not desire it. A lot of the plants that are found in landscapes, a great majority of them came from Asia. Anyone know why?
'Cause they could.
And
sell-
they're
They
actually,
could say, oh, it's this new plant, and,
But they brought some plants over because of the nutritional value, like the creeping Charlie's high in vitamin C,
oh, yeah, that's.
and
what I brought in.
dandelion.
well, it's a,
Something on a
And
ground cover.
plantain.
bee balm, but you do need light. You do need light for bee balm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bunchberry.
I think you should just go with ferns.
Yeah, okay, I consider doing first.
So what I was getting at as far as adding an element to it, most people plant sort of on a single plane. You work the soil and then there's this red oak root coming out. And I don't really like it, so they chop the root off. Mistake number one. Add a rotten log. Put a large stone. Put some farming artifacts and grow things amongst there that provides a stump. You can get a contractor to just deliver you a big stump.
You can also do trilliums.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
I've done trilliums.
There's another sensitive plant to dig up in the wild, trillium.
Oh, it's hard, yeah.
So you have to,
Off in the lab.
well, it is illegal, but there are people who have property abutting against a native area and you can get trillium. So you have to do, if you know the plant sensitivity, do it a year in advance, or say a minimum of 4 months in advance. By root pruning it, watering it, add more leaf humus around it, and you will succeed. That's how these bonsais are actually achieved. It's just preparation. It's not just digging up the plant. Keep in mind, those bonsais, some of them are well over 100 years old, and it's only that tall. But if you had not pruned it, it could easily grow in excess, some species, more than 100 or more than 100 feet. But again, keep in mind that native plants are not always the solution, depending on your site. They're really not. I can give you another example. There's some beautiful wild grapes out there. I know you're asking for low things, but there's some beautiful wild grapes out there. And they have their place in the garden if you like that sort of thing. You can actually buy poison ivy that is a specific fall color. It's spectacular. No, seriously, you can actually buy it because poison ivy will draw in seed of waxwings. Songbirds will actually eat the seed.
It's another one we needed use for.
Yeah, really.
I always thought that it would have been great to collect all the poison ivy that we have in this county. And just grind it down and airily drop it over the Middle East. And that's how you get the culprits when they come out scratching, you know, oh, he's one of the guys I. There's a biorational means of doing the war rather friendly, and they come out scratching, okay. But only that's like 1 in 4. 1 in 4 is affected by poison ivy.
You gotta have the both.
Thank you. Yes,
Only 1 in 4?
yes.
Yeah.
It is the most toxic natural substance on the face of this planet.
But only
Poison.
but only 1 in 4 people are affected by it?
Yep. See, what's the other one? There's some really interesting things about poison ivy, seriously. So you still want to do native. There are some native junipers you can actually find out here.
Yeah.
They'll grow maybe 1.5 feet tall off the ground. But if you want something really low, I'll give you something that is not invasive. It's very appealing, particularly to the nose, and is a wonder to see, and that is Corsican mint.
Oh.
Anyone know the plant?
That'll spread.
No, but it doesn't spread. You know, it's not going to take over your house. Yes. You plant it really shallow. When you walk by and you step on it, people are going to say, what is that smell?
A little tiny leaf?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
Corsican mint, Mentha requiem. It grows 1/2 inch.
Yeah. And if you walk on.
And when you walk on it, people walk on it and go, where is that coming from? I said, you're stepping on
It's like sun.
it. Sun and shade. Of the native time, that I do not know. And you're the lady who mentioned about Creepy Charlie. They are plenty of plants that grow in someone's yard that can be used for enhancing a dish. But you have to be cautious about has that yard been chemically treated. Some plants really absorb in the tissue, so I would be cautious to use that. Yes.
Tree stewards have had a problem for 20 years and we can't get a definitive answer from any arborist. So we're thinking there is no answer. We do a lot of work on big trees, street trees, and we encounter a lot of strapping roots and girdling roots. How big a girdling root can we go after right at the base of the tree?
I would not go anywhere close to 3 inches.
Oh,
Anything
thank
big,
you.
I wouldn't. But again, it goes back to what I was saying,
Bigger than-
identify the tree, identify the site.
Most of these are on Norway maple. Some are on other.
See, that was
maples.
a bad choice of trees, seriously. It's not because you mentioned, because Norway maples are notorious if they're planted in an area of not quote unquote friendly soil. It will self-girdle itself. It will go around, particularly whoever installed it, they're not butterfly. You know, the part of the butterfly where you take a root mass and you're scoring it. It's called butterflying. You're doing that to promote new aggressive roots out. If they just take it out of the root ball, out of the container and plop it in, that root ball, because it's already started doing this around the container, it'll continue doing the same thing.
That's what the city did for about 30 years. Planted them 2 deep, container trees.
Yep.
Root bound. And now we're coming along 40 years later trying to cultivate.
Because you're also fighting this, in a city situation, you're fighting also compaction by traffic. Snowplow or even daily traffic, and then and I'm sure you've done some sites where you found out, like, is there any life in that soil? It's so compact, everything around it, essentially, it's growing in a bowl. And it's going to continue doing this. And that's when the tree becomes a public hazard, as far as even insurance. It has happened where trees are just toppled over. I know.
Are you I heard you right. You said 3 inches.
I would not do anything larger than 3. With today we have wonderful tools. The simplest way is a battery operated sawzall.
You can't use any electric.
They don't let us use any power.
We're not even, this is an insurance thing for the municipality.
Yeah.
So you're forced with a handsaw and
It's good exercise.
and then a chisel. You need a broad chisel. Or you can take a spud, which is just for logging, and sharpen a piece of steel and just,
A chisel. I never thought of that.
you can go to a garage sale, find an old timer, the forged chisels, the broad ones. There are no less than 2 inches. And just score it and then go back. But if you can get one, it's don't think that you're gonna do better by using carbide, because carbide just cuts by blunt force. It doesn't cut by an edge. So if you have what I'm getting at is a stony situation, don't think about using carbide. Well, it's not gonna do it. It will, but you're gonna be smashing cells, and that's, if the soil is poor, that's an entry point for fungal. And since you deal with Norway maples, fungal issues, not only in the leaves, but in root, I'm sure you've seen trees with large cankers on it. It just is sort of grotesque looking. That's a weak one. Just the cells, the fungus got in there and it's preventing continual moisture traveling through. It goes on the backside, and then you get this thing. So you get the right wind, right leverage, it will break off at that point. Yes.
Native plants.
Oh, thank you. I know I heard that. It's a wonderful plant. The only thing I don't like is those darn spurs.
And they're wonderful. Two things with disease, blackness. And second is this other thing where the fruits blow up.
So you have fungal,
Yeah,
and the black knot is the worst one.
yeah.
And you know, I'm sure you read it. If you have black knot, you cannot plant any member that's in the prunus family. Almonds, cherries, and there's peach and laurel. Apricot, and there is actually a laurel that's actually in the prunus family. So you have to dig it up and get rid of all the soil.
Yeah, we encounter a lot of black knot. City tree. Should we even touch them?
How
Or do we
extensive?
just-
How extensive is it?
It depends on the tree. If it's, I mean, we have black knot on a hawthorn tree. And we were able to take the
So you haven't,
branch out.
and there you haven't galled on a hawthorn.
See, we never thought about the gall on the
And we've been
trees.
able to take out a branch where it's just a little bit.
And disinfection is critical.
Right there.
Every step of the way, before you start, after you cut it, before you go to the next limb, right next to it.
We try to keep the tools separate.
Yeah, and then
Alcohol.
Yeah,
wipe it off.
alcohol, even bleach, and then you have to take all that material, get it rid off-site, and it should never be chipped and used as mulch back, because you start the vicious cycle all over again. So you have to be cautious. I'll just touch on briefly, is when you're asking for free wood chips for these offices, you have to ask them, where have you been? Are you chipping up poison ivy encrusted trees, black knot, cankers? There's a whole host of things. So if you have something sensitive in your yard, it has to be well composted. You got to get it up to heat before you apply anything. So black knot it can't be controlled, but I'm sure you've done the homework. It's very expensive, the process. The only option left is grow with the plant until it withers away.
So is it unethical to leave the tree, continue to have that black knot, or do we call up the DPW and say, take this tree out because it's got black knot? They won't touch
She answered the question.
it.
They
Well,
won't
that's
do
what
it.
the tree stores are more apt to work with the black knot in the city.
And they won't do it because it's just like National Grid. They will not remove a tree if it's still alive. It has to be totally dead.
Oh.
You can bake them a pie, they're not gonna do it. You know, bake them a cake, yes.
Going to transition to discuss. Then concerning, I just moved here from Virginia, by the way, so I'm not English, but I'm Virginian. Whatever that means.
The state of most presidents,
Ah, all right.
yeah.
I did not know that. All right, yeah. But I've been entertaining like a you pick flower field or garden. And so I think that this is somewhat of an appropriate seminar to attend when we're talking about pruning perennials. You know, essentially, do you think that that might be something successful here? And can it be done where we're, you know, if there is education in advance, how to prune the
There is
flowers,
the key is education.
right?
Some people are
Always.
not, why would I want to go out there and, but it don't, you know, about pruning and perennials. There are individuals, mostly women, they'll go out and they'll buy a kind of dry flower arrangement, whether it's baby's breath, the willows alive, and a host of other things. And they'll pay top dollar. Oh, I'll give you a good one. Chinese bittersweet. Which in the South, you know, it just grows beautifully in the right way.
The little orange.
Yeah, the orange and the yellow and it really sparkles. There is an American bittersweet, but it's not as profuse in bloom as the Asian bittersweet. It goes back to education. I can see it working. I'm not just being sort of supportive of you. I can see it.
Yeah. and
You
that's
just have to
the part
educate,
that we wrote out.
you know, make yourself available to seminars where I lived in the Olympic Peninsula, Washington State. There's this little nursery in Sequim, Washington. They would harvest a lot of things. I mean, the classic things would be lavender, meadow rue, and just have these little sachets, and they're sold like hotcakes. It just there are a lot of plants in this area that I can think of that people just particularly men that call it a trash tree, or because they have no name for it or they have no use for it themselves, but everything else is just terrible. Meaning they don't give it credit. I'll give you one that grows around here. We're not getting to perennial, but it holds its place in this area, and that is it's Hamalis virginialis, which is the witch hazel. And that grows probably in some of your yards. It probably grows in your backyard. Or even some of the parks, you can find witch hazels. Some of them have already they're done blooming. Some of them will actually bloom in February. You'll actually see the yellow ribboning flowers. And the other varieties will actually bloom much later. When I say later, it'll probably be another 2-3 months from now, depending on weather.
So it's possible to, because essentially I'm not trying to do this as like a business model, but essentially there are plants that will continue to flower if like cut correctly.
Yes.
Okay, all right, so that's the goal.
Just remember that the second, after the first cutting, many plants do not respond to the first bloom. There'll be fewer. There are a great many plants that Spirea is one of them. The so-called ever-blooming hydrangea or even ever-blooming lily. The second, it's not as, you really have to baby it. A lot of that problem is, I find, is the developer of the plants. It's because they're in the business of trying to sell. They don't really tell you the truth of where do you live and what's your sun like, what's the soil like, how much you can't achieve a second bloom. But you have to sort of take it from a grain of salt when you see things that ever blooming, ever bearing, ever fruiting. It's not going to be as the first crop. And we all are aware now, it's always happened, but we are more aware now because of media of the concerns about weather. I'll give you a case in point, Great Bear, the wild apple trees there. They were domesticated at one time, but they're not, they haven't been fruiting, partly it's because it's just pollinators, and but more importantly, it hasn't been long-lasting snow cover. So perennial gardens will follow the same thing. But I can see, I know a business out west that will take cuttings from the garden, whether it's native or non-native, and use them in either as food or as an additive to say soaps. Whether it just to be an exfoliant or the fragrance. Well, I mean, the classic one is whether it be rosemary or what's the other one, lavender. There's a whole host. There you go. Sage and soaps. I mean, it's all that. America started that way. We were harvesters. We have gotten away from actually harvesting because of even after the war, the growing use of chemicals, trying to kill off things. I mean, the developer of 2,4-D, and anyone knows what 2,4-D is, the weed killer, he regrets that he couldn't isolate the fact that he's also killing Dutch clover, which is beneficial. He does make that statement that he regrets that he couldn't develop something that would not affect everything, but 2,4-D will kill just about anything it comes in contact with. Because we all wanted that green lawn, but a green lawn does not exist in nature. It is an artificial environment requiring a lot of mowing, a lot of fertilizing, a lot of watering, and golf courses will not survive without fungicides. It's really expensive. So it's not only expensive, but the biggest one is it's labor intensive. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was thinking about the idea of regrowth and so on, and use in multiple berry, and I'm thinking the berry plants today.
What kind of berries do you have?
Blueberries, raspberries. Yeah, a couple blackberries.
Do you have just one variety of blueberry, or do you have?
No, several.
Thank you. A lot of people think, oh, I'm gonna have.
Well, I have at least two.
Yeah, you gotta have a mix.
Yeah.
You got to.
And I watched a whole lot of videos, you know, as people do, right? And you can tell sometimes if someone's not an expert, but sometimes you can be fooled, right? So I
Yes.
looked for what seems to be credible stuff. It seems that, in particular, watching professionals do it. But for example, blueberries, what I have come to understand is having a really pretty bush is not going to get you a lot of blueberries. Having a rather straggly looking kind of thing that's got all kinds of air, you look
Yes.
through it and say, where's the bush? Then you get the big berry.
But blueberries will bloom or bear fruit on a second year of wood.
Right, right.
No different than a lilac. A lilac, so you have to exercise pruning. How much to take off? It's a balance. No one can tell you 30%, 10%. You have to look at how your plants.
They give you things like that. People that would say, okay, no more
Yes.
than a third.
I would adhere to that, and sometimes I would even. If they say 10, I'll do 5.
Yeah.
If they say 10, maybe.
Take more time to get where you want.
Yes, be selective. The one thing, I'll get to you in a second. The one thing I want to say about that is, I look at the artistic form of gardening. As you're pruning, I'm sure you've had a limb in your hand. Take time to look at that limb after you pruned it. Look at the shape, feel it. Be with it. It's sort of a Chevy Chase thing where he's going, be the ball. And he's going, I do that a lot. Richard knows it. I have limbs at home I even have photographs of nature's way of twisting and turning, and even if it's just touching it. I have plenty of those. And if I had a bigger garage, I would have more. I'm a pack rat when it comes to botanical specimens. Yes, sir.
So I bought a house in Oswego like 2 years ago, and it has a huge back lawn over an acre. And I've been looking to convert that into like how to do it, but it's really number.
Thank you for saying exactly.
But the wood that my house backed up on, that actually the neighbors told me the previous owner cleared those woods to create that. When I walk back there, there's an area where they do clearing periodically for like power lines. And there's beautiful wildflowers all over that. So I've been kind of trying to mimic that in the backyard instead of doing this labor intensive.
You wish to take the natural, whatever God spread on his land, or as opposed to seeding it.
I've just been waiting to see whatever God plays. But-
That's the way.
Okay.
Because if you're seeding it, there's always, everyone I've spoken to that I've had is major disappointment, and I'll give you an example shortly. You can buy, it's quite expensive, a pound.
Yeah.
It's not cheap, but I will forewarn you, I'm not sort of deterring you from following that choice, but if it's your choice, particularly if you have the soil, it will work. But some of those seeds will take 5 years for it to germinate.
Yeah.
And unless you scarify the soil, even, this is what I was going to use an example. The Native Americans would light the plains on fire. Does anyone know why?
Oh, yeah.
New growth.
Exactly, and the new growth brought what?
Reseeding.
The buffalo.
Oh.
Exactly, and the antelopes. They would intensely set, and you can do that in your backyard. Just do an area, a small area, and just start a little brush fire there and get rid of it and just spread the ashes.
I know.
I know. On a small scale, you can put a container over it. And you can do it, and you will be amazed what comes up. But it's less labor intensive to do it whatever the wind, nature's whim, nature's law spreads on it. Earlier I spoke to you, sir. You purchased a lot and back the house is back in the 30s. And you waited a few years and you realize that things are still sprouting up. It takes a while for some plants. It's always there. So that is the best approach. So by regularly, and you can do, may I suggest, how large of an area are you doing or proposing?
Probably doing like an acre.
Do bands, be creative. It doesn't have to
I
be.
have a path going through it.
There you go. Do a meandering path, no straight line. And then you can keep a garden diary, which I encourage everyone to do here. Keep a garden diary, and you say, well, this year this weather was so-and-so, and I mowed the area and its first cut at 4 inches. The other side, you may have mowed it at 5 inches or 2 inches, and see what the succession of plants are.
Okay, yeah,
And that'll give you, but only you can determine that.
yeah.
Usually you don't find that, but I know for a fact, because I've attended a few seminars, that if you buy meadow flowers, do not expect, even if you stand there with a garden hose, 24/7, and a little generous of the fertilizer, which is a mistake in the beginning, it's going to perform at its own time schedule. I believe there's a saying,
They sleep, first year they sleep.
the Ernest and Julio Gallo, it's never before its time. What is it?
They need to wait longer.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's something I'm very happy to do. I also have a wife who's. She thinks the
No, you can do, if you so choose, and I encourage you to, is be not afraid to carry a little envelope with you. You go buy a plant in the wild, as long as you can identify the plant, collect the seeds, cast
yeah,
it.
especially if I go like to the power line.
There you go. Because I'm sure you've seen things that it surprised you.
Yeah, I've seen things and I'm like, wow, I like that all over my yard.
There you go. Well, that doesn't work either.
Yeah.
No, there've been industrialists have made great efforts are trying to cash in. I'll give you one, a plant that for those who are naturalists and know the plant is the milkweed, the pot. You know, there's something unique about
Yeah.
they were trying to grow it for an inexpensive insulator for lining thing. When you take some of that milkweed and just hold it in your hand, just relax, don't even look at it, just relax. You will feel that your hand's warmth stays in there longer, but just softly holding on to it. I'm trying to answer your question. So they thought, well, we'll plant the whole field. That plant does not respond. It grows one here, one over there. And so,
It likes the garden where.
as they say, don't fool Mother Nature. If you see it responding well, do a test. They may do well. But then also do keep a diary of what you observed in that site. What is unique? What are the sort of the surrounding trees? Notice the birds that go by, animals, which are a great contributor too, is where there's a woodchuck, they'll take subsurface soil and then bring up to the surface, and then around their little den, like, how did that plant show up? And that's one of the things that I've learned when I lived out on the Pacific Northwest. Is a little, it's like a mini gopher, really small. It's called a pika.
Okay.
Thank you. You know it?
Yeah.
After a forest fire,
High altitude.
Yes.
pika.
that little darn thing can scream clear across the valley. It is. So after a forest fire, it's around the pika's little den that the first flowers will emerge after a major forest fire, because they're taking those seeds, using it for bedding or consumption, and then the exits just get blown back, and that's where you find the plants called the fireweed,
Okay.
which has the same color as our what's the invasive water plant here? Thank you, but it's prettier. It's much prettier.
Yeah, very pretty.
And you see, and it's all attributed to an animal just stirring up the soil. So make it enjoyable.
Yeah, thank you.
That way you can rub it in on someone else's nose. No, I yeah. I've been fortunate. I've been exposed. Sorry. To a lot of places in the U.S. I've seen wonders. Not only plants. But there are plants that I come across also, they'll say, they won't grow there. It's growing in my backyard. Talk to it. And you'll see my point. Sorry about it. But I've seen some wonderful things out there. And I just hate when people just plow, burn, cut, slash, denude the land, protecting its development. And then they're trying to bring back the tree that originally stood there. And why is it not growing? Well, the good soil, that was the humus soil, is now been sold to another lot, or it's now 5 feet under. And you have to reestablish the natural biome of the soil.
Yeah, is that like, one thing I worry about, like, I let the grass grow pretty tall, and then I cut it down before it flops over. But there's starting.
Which is actually because you're allowing the plant to store all that into energy, which is the seed. And there's some beautiful grasses out there. There really are. But most of us don't see it because it's all mowed.
Yeah, and I've been like trying to decide, do I want to take that grass and compost it, or do I want to leave it in place to provide nutrients?
Yes, all of the above. No, I think we're all have seen videos, YouTube lectures, movies, seminars about the importance of what attaches itself to that root structure. Getting back to what you're saying about adding nutrients. I'll give you a simple one, clover. It takes airborne nitrogen, fixes into the root system, and other plants use that nitrogen as a steady source of simple nitrogen. Because nitrogen, the way we're sold to store, isn't what the plant uses. It's converted from nitrogen to nitrate to nitrite. It's nitrite that is beneficial for the plant. And for our digestion if we decide to eat it. Anyone? Yes, ma'am.
I was just gonna inquire, are there a number of like local gardening clubs?
Here.
Lessen their goals or interests because they felt that they couldn't have like volunteers that might be able to help with their vision and things like that. So that's why I just kind of wanted to inquire, because I'm sure
Yeah,
that was
that's it.
very helpful and something that others you have to help you with.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing the garden club. I want to forewarn you. There are plenty of garden clubs out there. For some of them, because I deal with some of the members. But some of them is strictly is a social committee. It is not what we're discussing. The do's and don'ts of planting, plant care. All it is that, oh, my rose won first prize blue ribbon.
We have a beautification committee and we do a lot of work around town.
So you have to be involved. You have to put hands in the soil.
And we sell native plants, perennials at our garden plant sale, which is coming up in May. You can follow us on Facebook. Oswego Garden Club.
Okay, that's good enough to remember.
Yes.
Yes, and we do socialize too.
No, I'm not gonna mention it. There's one that it troubles me because I'm not going to exaggerate, but I'll say this. I've had people talk to me about certain things. There's one woman that I said to them, if you're not gonna listen to what's written and my experience and even the plant, I'm ready to walk out of here. And then, but I want greener grass. I said, it's brand new seeded grass. It's not gonna be, when you were born with a nice, soft, clean, white little butt. The plant is the same thing. You just have to wait till, and I said, yeah, but can we get a different green grass? I said, whether I give you any grass from the Timbuktu here, it's going to emerge not totally green at the beginning. It's breaking out of its shell. And she doesn't understand it. So I walked out there going, they've done it multiple times to me. And I've actually one time just walked out and said, you gonna do the reading? And I'm not here to market this, but I'm not going to satisfy your whims when it's not going to work in nature. It's not going to work. So some of these, that's why I warn people. I've been to some of these, and sometimes it's a social. I applaud, I embrace the social thing, but if you're going to grow roses, you should know what it takes to grow roses. You have to know the soil. You have to know the soil. Not everything comes in a miracle grow bag. Yes, sir.
His project on his, that acre of land reminds me of kind of what I did on, we have about 8 or 9 acres, was a farm owned by farmers. There were 2 trees on a piece of property when I moved. And now there are lots of them.
See the succession of things.
Yes, and what I've been doing for a long time is every fall picking up nuts of all kinds in different places and throwing them all over the place, figuring that even with the northern squirrels, some of those are gonna find a place to grow. And
There's a book you should read, you will enjoy.
what's that?
The Man Who Plants Trees. It's about it's after the Second World War. It's a real simple book.
The man? I'll look it up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
are you familiar with the book, sir?
Yeah, well, it is.
Am I just stupidly naive?
No. You gotta read this book then. It's a real simple. You could do it in one sitting.
Makes sense to me. Yeah.
No, that's how nature does it.
Yeah,
That's how nature does it
yeah.
all the time. Anyone else questions?
Well, I have one quick one. When I
Sure.
was a kid in Fairhaven, there were 4 places near the state park that I would go to get elderberries. And I've gone back during different years, and I can't hardly
Find
maybe
any,
just one find yeah. Do you have to prune them? You know, should we, or how do I get them back working without the?
Selective thinning.
Hmm?
Selective thinning. Keep the more vigorous limbs there and get rid of the thicker, older.
Okay.
Similar to the blueberries.
Blueberries, lilacs,
Them too.
uh,
Think deer like them.
what's it like?
Elderberry.
Oh, yes.
They do
So-
a lot of that.
So I know mine, elderberry didn't do well because.
Yeah, because I used to make,
Deer got it.
when I was a kid, I made pies, but they decided they're not for eye anymore.
But I will say this, the elderberry, and I'm sure someone will attest to this also. They haven't been that fruitful in the last few years. They haven't.
Oh.
Some of it, there are times you can go at 60 miles an hour down the road and you can see the beautiful bloom and you go, what is that? If it's that tall, it's an elderberry. Have you seen that many out in the wild? When I say in the wild, it's not going to be in the forest, it'll be.
On the edge.
Exactly. Anyone else? I'm here, please.
Okay, I have a hairy lauder and I heard that they're dying from some kind of fungal disease in this
Yes, it's a
area.
blistering, it has little
How
pustules.
do I protect mine from that? And it's beautiful, it's, 10 years old.
The simplest trick that I've done is just take a diluted spray bottle with bleach.
Just spray it.
Yeah. And but you have to be clean about it. And that's why you can control it.
The only time I prune
But
it,
thin it out.
well, I don't thin it out. I only prune because it's grafted. And it gets.
Thank you for
those-
saying that.
Yeah.
It does
And I
not
get-
appear in nature as a
Right,
species.
and I get the big straight sticks on it, so I cut those off.
No, you want to keep, it's like doing an apple tree. You have to keep a certain balance of vigorous new growth and you take out the older, non-productive growth. Your eye will tell you. Your eye will tell you, like, well, this is more resilient, it's more robust. You want to keep a certain amount of that. You can't take them all out because all you're doing is encouraging this massive woody growth. As it gets woodier, buds are not going, as it gets woodier, this is one way to look at it. Its bark is not directly, or how can I put this? Light is not penetrating that bark to stimulate a bud. It's too thick on some plants. When earlier I said about if you want to determine whether a plant or limb is alive, they just prick it. Well, as it gets really thick and barky, which all plants will do, its new growth will be further out because it's being stimulated by the natural hormone called an auxin. It's stimulated by light. It's just going to get long and lanky. So don't take it's sort of like a reddish, almost like a burgundy color, the new growth, and it's greenish. You don't want to take them all out. You want to take some out, but not all of them.
I just take out the ones that are crinkly and the ones that just grow straight.
Did you have a magnifying glass at home?
Probably.
Or you can take your smartphone,
Right.
hold it very steadily, and taking a large photograph. Do you have an Apple phone?
No.
Well, there should be a feature where you could touch the screen on your phone, hold it steady, and there'll be a square coming out, and it'll say AE and AF. AE is automatic exposure, AF is automatic focus. So you can get a real close-up photograph standing still and see whether you can determine of the blisters. If you have no patience for that, take an X-Acto knife or a utility knife and scrape it up and see where you find discoloration underneath the bark.
Oh.
And if you have that, you gotta get rid of it. It can be controlled, but you have to do it young. You don't wait till it's widespread, then the plant is not producing chlorophyll, so it recedes back to the rootstock, and then the rootstock, the leaf is totally different. You're not gonna
Yeah.
get, you'll just get
The
this.
contortions.
Exactly, you're not gonna get it.
The man who planted trees, $5 on eBay, free shipping.
It's a very entertaining book. And people look at it and say, well, it's just a book. I said, no, if when you go to France, you look at the field, like, how did all these trees get here after the Great War?
Oh, yeah.
Read the book. And it's all patience. It's all patience. He is sort of like the Johnny Appleseed of the United States. Oh, thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
You're gonna ask me, when am I gonna come to your home?
mention it. You're gonna come. No, we have about 3 acres of woods that have been ignored for 55 years since we looked at. And some of the trees are maybe 60, 70 feet tall. Lots of them have fallen down because of the wind, and it's also on an incline, and it's wet. Parts of it are very wet. Is there any positive aspect of just letting it do its thing, as opposed to going in and clearing and,
Natural selection, Charles Darwin.
yeah. That's what I'm doing.
And when I say that or suggest that is that what are the trees that are bending over? No, red maples,
Well, a lot of the
box elders.
ash trees.
Yeah.
Oh, well, regretfully, but the last 3 weeks, that's all I've been doing, eliminating.
Yeah.
It was way too late. Even if I'd done it 3 years ago, well, the beetle's already inside.
But everything's just, I mean, it's just laziness on my part. It's not like I'm trying to.
But if
preserve
someone,
Nature as such, although it's being preserved in its natural state.
what would you like to see?
Well, what we're seeing is native grasses, wild fern, sweet fern, coming at the bottom of the hill, working its way up. We have Primrose japonica, which I don't know if the deer brought it over. It's like, half an acre away from where the farthest they would have lived. So it's like we're watching change, moving up the hill. And I'm fine with that because I do talk to them as well and the deer.
Don't you find it heartwarming?
Yeah, the problem.
And you develop a certain peace being out there as opposed to, I know people who actually, it's just noise and, no, we need a bigger chainsaw, we need a bigger axe, we need a bigger tractor. I go, no.
I think it's more liability issues, our acreage is surrounded by other houses on the same street, where you have the back lots. But, okay.
Don't shoot the messenger, but I.
No, I didn't want to.
So,
I work late.
thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh my God.
And,
But it's empty.
yeah. If you would be so kind to sign in, we're not gonna hound you, we just like to have an idea of how many people were here and where, if you could check off where you heard about this and so on, it just helps us focus in on where we want to do our PR and so forth, so we really appreciate it. So thank you, everybody, for coming out, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could be limited.